Remote viewing, the talents of psychics, mystics, or any of the other of the tags that are placed on those who can see beyond the limits of the majority of us, are embraced by some and equally ridiculed by others. Perhaps it's surprising that when many government agencies in the United States and elsewhere around the world would seemingly be in the former category. The CIA took a particular interest in the abilities of people who claim to be able to leave their body and travel to destinations hundreds, even thousands of miles away, completely undetected. The possibilities for espionage were seemingly limitless with such a weapon at their disposal. Ingo Swann. As well as the CIA, many other intelligence agencies around the world have investigated the possibilities of remote viewing. Most notable of these is the former Soviet Union during the Cold War. One of the people initially employed by the United States to remote view and spy on the activities of the Soviets was Ingo Swann. He was regarded as one of the best in his field. He had repeatedly proven his skills, and his success rate in the terms of key espionage information was very high. In February 1975, Swann was instructed by a shadowy gentleman who worked out of Washington, D.C., and he would be required to work on a top-secret mission, and that a Mr. Axelrod would be contacting him very soon to instruct him further. Almost a month went by before the mysterious Mr. Axelrod made contact with Swann. It was a quick, one-way conversation, and he was told to meet Axelrod at the National Museum of Natural History. Once there, a man representing Mr. Axelrod greeted him, before hustling him into a car. They were driven to an unknown destination where a helicopter stood waiting. Already feeling rattled, Swann's anxiety went up a little more when he was blindfolded once as he was in the helicopter. Such was the secrecy of their destination. When he finally arrived, still blindfolded, he was led to an elevator. The doors slid shut, and he could feel it descending. It seemed to do so for some time, suggesting to Swann that he was being led into one of the rumoured underground bases said to be under the US military's control. The elevator finally came to a stop, and Swann was led into a room where the blindfold was removed. In front of him there stood Mr. Axelrod. Coordinates for a colony on the moon. Mr. Axelrod quickly introduced himself to Swann, whose mind was reeling with everything that happened since arriving at the museum that afternoon. He also volunteered that Axelrod was indeed a pseudonym and not his real identity. He began to grill Swann on the ins and outs of remote viewing and how he achieved his results. He also stated he was prepared to offer him an extremely large amount of money for his services. As if he needed reminding, the work would be of a top-secret nature. Tentatively accepting the offer, not feeling as if he had much of a choice, Axelrod then began to ask Swann as to the extent of his knowledge regarding the moon. He then presented him with coordinates and asked him to remote view what was there. Apprehensively, Swann did so. He found himself leaving the earth and heading towards the moon, the dark side of the moon, to be precise. He claimed he could see buildings and glass domes-like structures. His spiritual body entered this moon city. It was then that he noticed living beings. He described what he was seeing to Axelrod, including that these beings appeared to notice his presence. This prompted Axelrod to bring the session to an immediate end, calling to Swann urgently, "Come away from there right now." Swan, extremely shaken by the experience, rushed back to his physical body, and after gathering himself, asked Axelrod what he had just seen. Was there really a colony on the moon? Axelrod remained quiet. Swan asked again, indirectly insinuating that the beings might not be human, to which Axelrod was said to reply, "Isn't that something, huh?" Official records of remote viewing to Jupiter. 2 years previously, in 1973, Swan was involved in another CIA remote viewing experiment, one that took his astral consciousness to the planet Jupiter. At least according to the official records of the experiment, that also included the NASA and Stanford University in California. A detailed timeline of the experiment produced from the official records showed that the session began at 6 p.m. It was 3 minutes before Swan indicated that he was there in front of the biggest planet in our solar system, Jupiter. A journey that it seems, at least in the astral form, takes only minutes. He made several interesting statements about the planet, including that a ring was present around the celestial body. When the Pioneer 10 probe completed its flyby mission shortly after Swan's claims, sending back its valuable data to NASA scientists, his statement was confirmed as absolute fact. Swan was extremely unlikely to have known this information without him having seen it for himself, with his own eyes, astral or otherwise. Not even the top scientists and astronomers of the day were aware of the ring around Jupiter until the Pioneer 10 flyby. If Swan then was right about the ring around Jupiter, then he might also have been correct about what he claimed to have seen cities and buildings on the moon. And if he is correct about those, then does that imply that all these crazy whistleblowers who have claimed to have been to these cities might also have been telling the truth? The CIA certainly appeared to have enough faith in Swan's ability. The phenomena of remote viewing in general continues their sessions. In 1978, Project Stargate was initiated. Basically, the continuation of the experiments that they had been conducting already for several years. And this is the following transcript of Swan's vision of Jupiter. It's very high in the atmosphere. There are crystals. They glitter. Maybe the stripes are like bands of crystals. Maybe like rings of Saturn, though not far out like that. Very close within the atmosphere. An intelligible sentence, he then says. I bet they'll reflect radio probes. Is that possible if you had a cloud of crystals that they were assaulted by different radio waves? Now I'll go down through. It feels really good there, and he laughs. I said that before, didn't I? Inside these cloud layers, those crystal layers, they look beautiful from the outside. From the inside, they look like rolling glass clouds, eerie, yellow light, rainbows. I get the impression, though, that I don't see that it's liquid. Then I came through the cloud cover, the surface. It looks like sand dunes. They're made of very large greyed crystals, so they slide. Tremendous winds, sort of like maybe the prevailing winds of Earth, but very close to the surface of Jupiter. From that view, the horizon looks orangish or rose-coloured, but overhead it's kind of greenish yellow. If I look to the right, there is an enormous mountain range. I feel that there's liquid somewhere. Those mountains are very huge, but they still don't poke up through the crystal cloud cover. You know, I had a dream once, something like this, where the cloud cover was great arc and it swept over the entire heaven. Those grains which make that sand orange are quite large. They have a polished surface and they look something like amber or like obsidian, but they're yellowish and not as heavy. The wind blows them, they slide along. If I turn, the whole thing seems enormously flat. I mean, if I get the feeling that if a man stood on those sands, I think he would sink into them. And he laughs again. Maybe that's where that liquid feeling comes from. Randy Kramer and more claims of a secret space army. There has been talk before about secret space armies under the control of the US military and financed by black budgets, including the presence of colonies and cities on the moon, as Swan stated he saw. Various whistleblowers have come forward claiming to have been involved in such secret space projects. One of the strangest of these, perhaps, is the claims of Randy Kramer. In 1987, when Kramer was 17 years old, he claims to have been woken by a bright doorway that appeared to be a portal of some kind suddenly opening in his bedroom. In the doorway stood two strange men, similar to descriptions of the men in black. One of the men reached out to him, beckoning him to come with them. Confused and believing it to be an intense dream, Kramer rose from his bed and stepped into the bright portal-like door. He further claims that he and up to 50 other teenagers found themselves in a huge hangar. In the center of the gigantic room was a black triangular craft, seemingly floating several feet from the ground. The group were told to enter the craft, which they did, half in awe and half in fear of the bizarre and surreal experience. The next thing they knew was one of the military-type men stepped forward and asked them to direct their attention to above their heads. According to Kramer, the roof then transformed into a huge glass window. Through it, they could see the Earth as they were moving away from it and out into space. They were told to make a good long look at the planet. Not only would they not see it for some time, but everything they were about to undertake was to defend it. The 20-year tour on Mars. Kramer claimed that the group were then flown to the moon, where, like Swan had claimed, to see remotely. They witnessed a huge city of tall buildings and glass domes. As if Kramer's account could not even get stranger, he then claimed that they were transferred to a different spacecraft, where they left the moon and went further out into space. The next time they landed, they stepped from the ship and were greeted by another military person who announced, matter-of-factly, when he greeted them, "Welcome to Mars." In short, Kramer stated he spent 20 years serving in a specialized off-planet military unit. He further claimed that he and others like him were specifically selected due to them being genetically equipped to withstand the mission. Following his 2-decade tour, Kramer asserts that he had returned to his bed back in 1987 and was a teenager again. He had been age reversed and then sent back in time. Although he remembered being brought back through the door portal, only 15 minutes had passed on his bedside clock from when he first left. He told himself that the experience, what was very little he remembered of it, was simply a dream. According to Kramer, it was a decade or so before he even began to experience the unlocking of his repressed memories. Mirrored details in other whistleblower cases. Whether Kramer's account and experience is true to any degree is obviously up for discussion. He did make a report of his memories to MUFON, widely regarded as a very credible independent UFO research network. What is interesting is that some of the finer details mirror those of other alleged whistleblowers. Al Balek and his alleged involvement in the Philadelphia experiment. Part of his claims involved being age reversed and sent back, and indeed forward, in time. Corey Goode has also made very similar claims of carrying out missions like Kramer described, including that he was sent back to Mars, and he spent 20 years there before being sent back in time and age reversed. In fact, Michael Ralph and Dr. Andrew D. Basiago also claim to have been involved in such projects. And what's more, they claim they were happening as far back as the late 60s. Like Kramer and Goode, Ralph claimed to have spent 20 years on Mars after being recruited for the project in 1976. He claimed his missions revolved around the building of 2 separate colonies on the Red Planet. Also like Kramer and Goode, he stated after his 20-year service was complete, he was age reversed and his memories of the mission suppressed. Dr. Basiago, on the other hand, claimed to have been fully aware of these projects, claiming that as well as colonizing Mars and the Moon, that the time travel capabilities were even utilized for political advantage. According to Dr. Basiago, he was shown images brought back from the future that showed him the carnage of the Twin Towers following 9/11 attacks. Whether you believe that remote viewing is real or not, there is undeniable evidence that the CIA are using remote viewers. All the while, the fact that we officially know far more than we're admitting about the Moon. In fact, that if ETs do exist, then certainly getting to Earth's skies and to the Moon, and even perhaps colonizing it and its water, would not be impossible for them. And if they are loitering in the lunar environment, perhaps they can chase away, well, NASA's efforts, of all things.